So this is number six. Yeah, the problem is, the idea is to document memories, but of course, as you open up one can of worms, it triggers a whole bunch of other memories. So yeah, I'm not really sure whether to go chronological because I'm still going, but because I'm still going way over time. Last one was double what I was aiming for. Let me just set this timer. And so yeah, so I'll get into it. So I had mentioned that I've been studying Japanese a couple of years at university. Had a great time. It was really encouraging. We had our own little study room there with most of the students from Chinese, Japanese, even Indonesian. We would kind of could use that common room, and there was coffee there and desk to study at. So we formed quite quite relatively close knit social group within the university. So that was quite nice to have, to build some friends since everybody was from everywhere else. Um, and yeah, my buddy Darren had gone off to Japan and had encouraged, through his letters, had really encouraged me to go and join him. And so October came along, finished the exams, and off I went to Japan for the first time. First time in a foreign country. Was never really interested in like going to Australia or to the UK because, well, Australia was too close. It was too much like New Zealand. So I didn't feel like, why would I go just to, for the same food, the same language. And the UK, once again, I didn't have that attraction. And these were the most common places that students or any New Zealander really would go to get some overseas experience. But yeah, not me. I was keen to jump in and immerse myself into the Japanese culture as much as I could, and just learn to speak the language as fluently as I could, understand it as well as I could. And so I sort of had all kinds of images of just like, staying away from anybody who was an English speaker, avoiding all foreigners, and just try to immerse myself into the whole culture. So yeah, that wasn't the reality in the end. Um, so I turn up to Japan, to Tokyo, and my buddy Darren, he comes and meets me at Shinjuku Station. He may have actually met me earlier. He probably met me slightly earlier, but I just remember carrying two big bags. My suitcases, two suitcases. I had a large one and a smaller one. Small was still, probably still had 15 kilos in it. The other one probably had 20. And no wheels. No, I was determined to, since I was hanging out at the gym most of the time, I was 20 or so, I was just going to, just going to grunt myself through this and carry these bloody suitcases the whole time. I think at that time, wheels on suitcases weren't really a thing either. So, and that was my first trip really. So, yeah. So anyway, and I had no idea how far it actually was from, I couldn't imagine, coming from Wellington, where the airport is 20 minutes away. Little did I imagine I was entering a complete different world, where distances, from Narita Airport to the center of Tokyo, easily 2 hours, and numerous train changes at like massive train stations where, I think I met Darren at Shinjuku Station, for example. At those days they were saying that 3 million people a day pass through that station, and there were hundreds, well, I'm saying hundreds, but, tens upon tens of exits, entrances, different levels, up, down, and people flowing the whole time. I arrived maybe 8, 9 p.m. at night, which, around 9 p.m., people are starting to leave work and head home. And by 11 p.m., 11:30, it's filled with people who've been drinking after work. So, and they're drunk and sometimes even vomiting on the train when it's around midnight. So, yeah, I managed to sort of be on that train in that rush hour time the whole time. Darren had arrived, just, he was used to this whole deal, and, he was Mr. Cool, and spoke Japanese fluently, and so of course I kind of had to look up to him as my guide, as I just this innocent little guy from a little place, and he was waving me to come down here, up there, shouting me orders, telling me what to do all the time. That was pissing me off. I was getting a little bit annoyed even quite quickly, but he got me to where I needed to go, and yeah. So of course I'm forever grateful for Darren's help. Yeah. So anyway, we went out. He was in the process of moving. He'd just got a new job, and he had to go back to his old apartment first in Inokashira. Beautiful place. There's a beautiful park there, Inokashira Koen, very famous, and some beautiful sakura, cherry blossom flowers there, and they have big parties there in cherry blossom season. And he'd been living at what they called a gaijin house, which is a foreigner's house, where it was temporary, cheap accommodation in very, very basic kind of style, which is in that case was maybe there was 6 or 8 rooms in a 2-story building, very old and a little bit shaky, and on traditional tatami mat floors with sliding doors, and people sort of passed in and out, and everybody was just living on what they call on your shoestrings, trying to survive in different ways in Japan. Some people were just passing through for, it could be a few weeks. Other people like Darren were more like long-term occupants. And yeah, so of course they formed friendships with those people, and So anyway, he was moving out of that situation because his new job was actually providing him accommodation above the school in a different prefecture. Also, he was moving from Tokyo. It would have been the Chuo line out to Inokashira, and so we had to go there first from Shinjuku. So at Narita, Shinjuku out to Inokashira, and then we had to go to a different prefecture. So we must have headed to Ikebukuro on the Yamanote line, which is the ring line in the middle. So we had to head back to the center so that we could grab another train going out on another direction, which was actually would have been the Tobu. I used to write it every day now. Seibu Seijo. No. The Tobu's. I'm getting my years mixed. Sorry, I was concussed on Wednesday. It's now Monday. I think my words are still escaping me. But yeah, on the Tobu line anyway. Why am I thinking Sobu or Tobu? But no, I think it's definitely the Tobu Sen, and which I'm sure it was a blue color. I went all the way out through Saitama Prefecture, so it goes out to like the Omiya, Kawagoe, and we were going in the direction of Higashi Matsuyama, at a little place called Sakado. So there was a lot of traveling, considering you just arrived at the airport a few hours ago. So, and he was gracious enough to, of course, allow me to stay at his house, at his new apartment where his new job was. So which he was taking a risk. I don't know if he told the principal of the school that he was bringing a mate home or not. I don't really remember. He probably would have had to get permission in advance, as we found out later when I did the same thing for another friend. So yeah. So anyway, we battled our way all the way to this little place called Sakadoshi. We just passed through the most crowded places of Tokyo, only to end up in one of the tiniest little, backwards spots actually that I would ever live in. So yeah, I just remember lying there on the floor, had nothing in the room. There was one traditional tatami mat room that was Darren's. It was a big one, but nice, new and clean, modern tatami mats, not like the old dirty ones he'd left behind in the gaijin house, in the foreigner's house. He'd moved up in the world to his own apartment, and it was actually on the top of a school, of what was called a cram school or a juku. So it was a privately owned school that kids would go to after their normal school. So if they finished school at 3 o'clock, they'd go to what they call a cram school to study for exams for maybe 2 hours. Maybe if they finished at 3, they might start the new one from 4 to 6 or something. And some other kids would actually go to a second cram school, depending on what stage of studies they were at, maybe from 6 to 8 or 7 to 9 or something like that. So, it was really, it was something which blew our minds coming from a New Zealand school system where, you go home from school, in my case, muck around and avoid doing your homework all day, basically, or putting off your homework as long as you possibly could. When you are like the age of the kids that I was talking about that were going to these schools, these are kids from anywhere from 8, well, actually even younger. Anyway, long story. But for young kids to have to go to a second school was pretty rough, and then slightly older ones would go to 2 older. So on the top of this kind of must have been 5 or 6 story building, there was accommodation, and there was a large apartment, I would guess, with very thinly cut, very almost like a felt kind of carpet on it, which wasn't really that pleasant. But anyway, it was clean and it was relatively modern. And then was one of the other Japanese teachers had the corner room on the same floor. But Darren had that corner apartment, which was really big. It would have been a 1, 2. Oh, was it a son? I think actually there was 3. There was 2 bedrooms plus the tatami room, and the lounge and kitchen was together. So that would make what they call a son LDK, a 3 LDK. Yeah, which is not bad, if you're alone. Except in his case, he was no longer alone. He had a flatmate to share his life with. Happiness, right? I mean, that was a lucky score for me because, I had somebody to stay with immediately the moment I landed in the country. I had somebody to stay with, and until I could, land on my feet. I didn't know. The thing is, I didn't know how long I was actually going to be there for because I bought what's called a 1-year open ticket, so that I could. The plan, I think, if I remember rightly, I think I had a plan. If I didn't, that wouldn't surprise me either. But I'm sure the rough plan was see what happens. Maybe try and get some work, and if things go well, stay longer. If it doesn't turn out, then I just come back for the next academic year, which would have been like February or something in New Zealand. So I had from October to February until the next academic year to sort of decide, maybe I was going to have a couple of months experience or who knows. So I really didn't know how long I was going to be away for. And but just to prepare for that, I had this ticket which was flexible on its return part. I'd also had the working holiday visa, which was a 6-month awarded thing, and then you get it extended before it expires for another 6 months. So I didn't know if I could even extend that for the full year. I didn't know how hard that was going to be or easy. But all I knew was that I had permission to work and I had permission to stay for 6 months, actually. The working holiday visa was. So, yeah. So I must have been like, well, at least I'll try and stick it out for 6 months anyway. We're coming up to nearly 15 minutes. Damn, I don't get very far. So I turn up at this place, absolutely exhausted. And Darren's in a... Now, the reason Darren's being a bit prompt with me, okay, and once again, I'm very grateful for everything he did, but he was a stressed young man. He had just come to the end of his tourist visa because he'd been staying for the last year on tourist visas, and his tourist visa was expiring, but he'd just got a new job, and he didn't actually have the official visa so that he could legally work, right? And because he was only just starting with that school, I don't know if they were so keen to give him a proper working visa, or probably actually what the deal was that they would give it to him, but you actually need to leave the country once first and come in and then start your new working visa. That would be the normal way. But as I'm talking, I'm realizing that he didn't. No, the school wasn't giving him a full, they weren't sponsoring his visa also. Okay, they're giving him a full-time job with accommodation, but they weren't sponsoring his visa yet anyway. Because some places they want you to work for them first for a while, see if they trust you before they'll go that far. Other places just don't do it. But if they're fully bona fide and confident, then they put up everything, which is really what you need. So he arrived, picking me up from the train station with one of the first things he said is, "Look, dude, tomorrow I have to go to Korea. I'm going to South Korea, and I'm going for like 3 or 4 days because my visa has expired, and I've got to come back on another tourist visa." That's why he was so stressed. And if he gets stopped at immigration, he might just get sent back to wherever he came from or back to New Zealand. And he had no idea. All he knew was his whole life, it was now just in the last couple of days, had transported it from one accommodation place to the other. Had this nice new apartment set up, her job set up. So his whole life for a whole year and all his stuff was there. He had left his previous position, setting up something new, but in 2 or 3 days on his way back into the country, because you need to leave for, you need to leave for at least 3 or 4 days to look like you're actually doing a tour, right? So when you come back, it's not like 24 hours you're out of the country. It looks a bit suspicious. If you're away for a few weeks and come back as a tourist, they might say, okay, you're moving around countries. But if you only go out for 24 hours, come back, if they look and they ask questions, they'll say, no, for sure, you're only working. So anyway, he's like, look, dude, I've got to leave tomorrow, and my whole life could just disappear, just like that. I have no idea. And this was making him very stressed and very sad and a bit depressive, and on top of this, he had a mate arriving, So, yeah. So I remember the first night in that place, just lying down. I didn't even have a futon. I don't think I don't really remember. I mean, but I'm sure probably Darren had arranged, something, some kind of sleeping mat for me in advance. I had my sleeping bag. Yeah, those days I used to carry a sleeping bag when I travelled. So yeah, I had my sleeping bag for sure. I don't know if I had anything else, but I do remember using that sleeping bag in some way or another in that apartment. So yeah, and it was just, I remember just being exhausted and just lying there looking out the window, and all I could see on the clouds was reflecting all these flashing lights. There were colours just flashing. There was red in the sky, and there was blue, and there was purple, and I was just sitting there looking at these clouds just flashing in different colours, thinking, what on earth is going on? What is that? It's not police, it's not ambulance. Just like the whole night there was just this constant movement of light, different lights, and a freaky sound. And it was the sound going, Yakimo, with a little bit of speaking, and then suddenly this weird speaker noise, like a bit of microphone feedback, and then back to the song, which was just going through. And it was freaking me out. I mean, well, it wasn't, no, more than freaking me, it was just surreal. It was weird. I just remember just being so exhausted from the journey. And here I was hearing something. It was actually coming from a car which was driving around and making, with a light on it, and just singing out the song, Yakimo. And then, Yakimo. But Yakimo de gozaimasu, or whatever it was, I don't remember the announcement. But it was just like weird. And before that, though, just to make it even weirder, you don't know what money you've got and stuff like this. I remember we went into the convenience store, 24-hour stores, which were on every corner, which was really great. And just, you know, going to find something to drink or to eat, and I had zero idea. Everything was written in Japanese, even though I'd studied Japanese and stuff. It was my first real life like encounter with how it functions when you have to eat something and when you have to buy something. So you know, everything you pick up, you work out, oh, this looks like it might be peanut butter, but you know, you go home and it's like something terrible which you've never had in your life, or you get a nice surprise that something tastes really good, but from the can on the outside with the writing, and you know, you're kind of like, you're just guessing everything you buy, and all the drinks were all different, and there was some great stuff there. Like people know now, these kind of sweet green tea products and stuff like that. There's a whole range of all these different drinks, you know, Aquarius and Calpis, and you know, all sorts of things, and you know, but everything you get was a surprise. It was like, wow, you know. And I just remember on my floor there was the pile of stuff saying that I couldn't swallow, and the other stuff I could, you know, just like opening, going, oh God, I thought this was this, and it was something else. And yeah, and when I woke up in the morning, of course, Darren wasn't there. He'd gone nice and early, of course, because he'd go all the way back to the airport to start his drama, and my drama kind of began. In a way, maybe I'm grateful that I just had those few days to just like, you know, work it out for myself, and just like, you know, and every night this guy was driving around with this announcement. I thought I heard the announcement say something like, oh, there's a foreigner in town or something. I was starting to get paranoid. Otherwise, the thing driving around my house every night, making an announcement. But what it turned out to be, because this was October, so we're heading into it's getting a little bit cooler. In the cooler months, heading into winter, the guys are in a truck and they're selling hot potatoes. They're selling sweet potato, and it's heated up in like a coal range, like a coal oven, and they drive around the neighborhoods just like an ice cream man did back home. We had Mr. Whippy back home. So you go out to the street, and the guy stops, and you get your sweet potato, and you sort of just start eating it there. And it's really popular, especially with the ladies. The ladies love it because apparently it's high in fiber, and you lose weight well, and it's sweet. So yeah. But they have a traditional song they play when they do it, in a particular sound that they all have. And it was Yakimo. I must look it up on YouTube. Must be somewhere there. Good example. And those flashing lights on the clouds that I could see were coming from a pachinko parlor. Pachinko is like a gambling game where you put your money into this machine, and you turn this knob, and it releases all these stainless steel balls, and there's flashing lights in the machine itself. It's like a fancy pinball machine, and you know, if you're really good, you start winning by you win the ball bearings as prizes if you hit the right pins and the right, you know, your ball bearings. They set off a certain prize or whatever it is, and they come and you get more and more of them flushing out. So if you're really good at this thing, you know, guys end up with like, you know, boxes like yay big stacked on top of each other. They're just sitting there for hours and hours on end with a cigarette, normally in a very zombied out state, playing this game. Some of them even just get their cigarette and stick it into the knob, so in the right position they just sit there and watch while the machine does everything for themselves. And yeah, and then you go and you change, because gambling was officially illegal in Japan, these little steel balls, and thousands, if you've managed to collect thousands, I don't know how they do, you go to the back of the pachinko parlor, exchange it for some like certificate or for some box of chocolates or whatever it is. Normally the pros, they would sort of come out with like a big pile of just like plastic boxes that might have been a keychain inside, or might have been a ballpoint pen. I don't know what it was, but you know, I noticed people would come out with like, you know, 30, 40, 50 of these identical boxes. I don't know what's going on here. They'd take it down the road, and there's a little counter with just enough space for the light to come through, and outside the premises is where you can exchange these gifts and prizes for actual cash, you see. If they exchange cash on the premises, then it's gambling. So you get a prize of whatever it is. I never really worked out the system because I'm not into gambling. I'm not interested really, but it's such a major part of Japanese culture and Japanese life, and a huge money-earning industry that you've got to know a little bit. I think so. But these things are very to attract customers. Of course, they're very like the pinball machines have become more and more modern as well. They're trying to really bring people in the door, so they've got lots of flashing lights and all sorts of things, music going, etc. And these lights from these parlors are just going like non-stop. I don't remember if they even stop overnight or not. But so for miles and miles and miles, sometimes all you can see in the distance, up on the clouds, is just these flashing lights. Dun, 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 dun. And of course, well, Japan's using these flashing lights for all kinds of marketing, actually. So it could be for any number of stores or. But anyway, arriving there on the first night and just being zonked out, watching these lights flashing and this airy voice coming over the speaker, I did think I had landed into Blade Runner. It did give me that sensation.